Yeah, you're right. That's not a good plan. I totally forgot.
You totally forgot the restrictions of normal people.
Yes, exactly.
You have to remember that every once in a while, we are what many people would consider Abby normal.
Welcome to My Hill to Die On, episode 6.
Everyone has things they're passionate about.
Things we want our friends to try and experience.
So we've convinced each other to try different things.
And we talk about these experiences to see if we can get just one more person
to join us on our hill to die on. As we have possibly mentioned in previous episodes, we both live in Japan.
Mm-hmm.
And there are certain things that have been changes from our previous cultures. We both grew up in America.
Mm-hmm.
And things that we really appreciate now that we're here. Really, really appreciate now that we're here. So we're going to talk about a few of those every once in a while, just to get the show going. Today, the first thing we want to bring up is how to get a hold of a waiter and paying in general.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, summoning the waiter.
Yes, so summoning the waiter. There are really two ways that calling the waiter is done in most restaurants here. The number one way that happens at most family restaurants, most common restaurants, is the bell. Mm-hmm. There is a little button that is on most tables that you just push the bell when you want somebody to come over and help you out.
Yeah, it is very nice to push the button and call the waiter. You know, because you don't have to be in line of sight. You can push it, they come. It is a very nice way of calling the waiter to your table.
So for people who are trying to imagine how this works, basically you push a button, there's a ding-dong sound that happens, and then there is a light-up board somewhere in the restaurant that has your table number that appears up there so they know which place to go to.
Yeah, usually it's on, like, if you can see the exit from the kitchen, usually it's like exactly the wall opposite that, so that as they're coming out they can see.
Oh, it's table 62.
Mm-hmm.
Or something like that.
Mm-hmm. I don't know when I learned about buttons. I don't have a good memory of that part of it, but I do remember. So my family came over to Japan for my wedding, and my brother is a very fidgety person, and it was the first morning we were there, and I brought them to Jonathan's. It's like a Denny's type chain, I guess.
Given the style of food they have, yeah, Denny's is a good parallel.
So I brought my mom and my brother to Denny's because they had arrived first to Japan, and my brother sat down. He goes, "Oh, what's this button?" And immediately pushes it. Immediately pushes it. Like, "Oh, here's a button. Push." I'm like, "No." So then the lady, of course, comes over. "Oh, is there anything you need?" No, sorry. We pushed it by mistake. But yeah, that was pretty funny. It's like, no, don't push the button. We're not ready yet. We didn't even pick. So, but yes, it is kind of a funny thing to get used to.
Mm-hmm. It's one of those things that when I go back to the States for holidays and things like that, I miss it.
Oh yeah. Oh, this summer I definitely missed the button.
Because really what I have to deal with in the States is I'll go out, and really I think it comes down to also the fact that more than anything else, if I'm eating out with people in the States, I'm usually in the middle of a conversation and really hitting my stride with the comment that I want to make, when undoubtedly that's when the waiter or waitress will walk up and be like, "Hey, can I get you anything? Oh, I see you're a little low on that water there."
Or they're nowhere to be found and you need them to order something.
Mm-hmm.
Or you need a fork or a spoon or something.
I'm just going to say it. I think the world needs to adopt the button.
Mm-hmm.
Everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And also, you know, the world also needs to adopt living wages for waiters.
Yeah, that too. Mm-hmm. Have you been at the places where if you lift the button off the table, it starts ringing?
I've never tried to lift the button. I just assume that the button should always stay there.
Well, yes, it should. Well, but if you lift the button, you can tell what table number you are, mm-hmm. so that you can see what table number you show up as on the light board, so that you can tell, did I push the button? Probably, most places you're not supposed to lift the button, but I have been to like one or two places where if you lift the button off the table, the button itself starts ringing. And that's always exciting. It's like beep, 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 beep. I'm like, oh, okay, I'll put it back down.
There's a couple of things that have been added to other restaurants around me. Like, there's a few that are moving from buttons to an actual touch screen.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I've been to a restaurant like that recently, too.
There's a gyoza place right across from my apartment that they've decided to move away from the buttons, and the counter seats now all have a touch screen. So just so you know, we can cut out the communication, like having to talk to human beings altogether.
I've been to some sushi restaurants that have done that first.
Oh yeah,
It's definitely expanding to other restaurants now.
it's usually the conveyor belt, the kaiten sushi, that tends to do that. But it is, yeah, it's the fact that it's spreading.
It is definitely spreading.
If you don't have a button, the other major way that I've seen done that happens at most restaurants is you basically flag them down. Just a little raise your hand and sumo-san.
Yeah, calling out sumimasen usually summons them pretty quickly. But the button is a much more convenient way. I mean, and I think too, some of the restaurants that are more Western style will have no button, right, and expect you to flag the waiter down.
Yeah.
But the more Japanesey family restaurants will be more of a push button system.
That being said, there are a couple of restaurants that try to go for the Western style of the waiter showing up every once in a while, but those are pretty rare.
Yeah.
I personally like that better because it means, for me at least, that the waiter does not come by to ask me how I'm doing every 30 seconds in hopes to get a good tip. Which actually brings us to the second awesome thing about eating out in Japan. There are no tips. Tipping is not a thing.
Because I guess they just pay above minimum wage to the waiters.
What?
What a novel idea.
How dare they?
But it is very nice not have to calculate tips.
Yeah. Basically, it comes down to the fact that instead of a waiter making barely anything and hoping that they are blessed with the kindness of charity from normal people, their employer actually takes the hit and pays them for the work that they do.
But also, I think there's definitely a mindset of service from the employees already in Japan.
Oh, of course.
People in service are very serving already. They're not angry at being at their job. They play the customer's king part all the time here. So it's kind of built into the mindset already.
So you don't have to worry about really bad service because you'll get good service. I haven't had bad service in any one location that I've ever been at.
I can't remember a specific time. Maybe it's been once or twice, but it's always very rare and always very shocking.
Yeah.
If you find somebody who gets angry at a customer.
Like I said, I personally have never had it.
Oh, I do like paying at the door also.
Oh, paying at the door, yes.
It is much nicer than having to call them over to get them to get to the check, because again, that brings back the problem of they're never around when you need them in America.
You have to wait for 45 minutes
Right.
and then go, we wanted the check a while ago. Where is this person?
Right. And then you slip your credit card in and you have to wait 5 minutes for them to come back and pick it up. Yeah, paying at the door is so nice. Everybody gets up together. It signals to the waiters that you're done. They run over to the cash register with you. You pay and you leave. All in like 2 minutes. It's very nice.
And many restaurants also, if the waiter does not notice that everybody is getting up to head out, there is also a button at the register as well. So you can bing bong.
To call them there.
Yeah, to call them there. So you can be like, yeah, I just want to give you my money before I run out the door.
Very nice system.
It is. When you walk towards the door, they also have chimes that happen whenever you walk in and out of the door. They know that somebody just walked out the door and did not go up to that register. Somebody's chasing after you. They have a lot of things set up to automate the annoying parts of eating out.
Cleans it right up. Although here's an interesting thing about paying at the door. I really messed with the Japanese system. We had a cross-country tournament just recently. One of the things we did this year at the tournament was we set up social outings with one school and another, because you go to these tournaments and you hang out with your team, and sometimes you converse with another team during warm-up or cool-down or something, but it's nice for these kids to learn from what it's like to be at another kid's school. Because, of course, your school is better in some ways, and, of course, their school is better in some ways. So it's always fun to hear what's going on. And I like to hear it, that's for sure. So this year, we got paired up with a school from Korea, and it was quite fun. And since the tournament was here in Japan, we were kind of showing them around different things and translating the menu for the other kids. So that was kind of nice. And then we went to pay, and this system completely failed here. Now, most of it, I'm very sure, is my fault, not the Japanese fault. It is my fault. There was 30 of us, so there's a whole lot of us. And I probably should have told the waiters at the beginning that we wanted separate checks for everyone. They probably wouldn't have liked it, but if I told them at the beginning, then as they do their number pad things, they could have set up separate orders right off the bat.
You mean for all 30 of you? Each of you having a separate check? Not by school?
Yeah, because, well, part of the problem is in Japan, they just raised the tax, right?
Oh, yeah.
So they don't have the new tax on the menu. So even if we had done it as a table, we still wouldn't have been able to figure out all of what everybody owes because the tax all changed. So yeah, I was pushing to do individual orders, which Japan can do. Like if you have a table of 5, it works well. But yeah, for all 30 of us, it was going to be hard. I understood. But, we have people from Korea who don't know the new tax structure, and the menu's not showing the prices to tax. So yeah, there was a number of problems here all in a row. So yeah, I said, can we do, in Japanese it's called betsu betsu, paying separately. They were having a hard time figuring this out too for us. So it did end up taking about 45 minutes for everybody to pay betsu betsu and get out the door. So it wasn't the most shining moment of this system. But at the same time, we were asking them to do something difficult. And even though it took long to go through, they handled it pretty well. We had 3 big tables, and they did it one table at a time. And every time a family who had finished at another part of the restaurant came up to the register, they took them first and then made our line wait. So, it was handled pretty well. It just took forever. I was a little bit frustrated, but this is where the system will fail.
Yeah. I guess that actually points out the one place that the system does fail, and it is in things that do not fit the normal.
Mm-hmm.
Your special orders, your tweaks, those things cause the system to break down a bit. You usually see people get that look of panic in their eyes right when you say, oh, can I change this one thing?
Mm-hmm.
There are certain stores where, yeah, that's not really the case, because, Starbucks is used to people going and getting somewhat of a special order.
Right.
But for most restaurants, if you're like, oh, I just want to change this thing, unless you're just asking them to take something off of your pizza or take it off of your hamburger or take it out of the dish, yeah, it's usually that makes people filled with fear. Especially when it's coming from a foreigner.
It probably would have been better if we paid by the table, but
what's done is done.
We got out, and some kids got to talk longer, so they got to socialize a bit more.
So that sounds like you accomplished the goal.
Yeah, It was a good time of socializing, that's for sure. It was longer than we expected, but it was good.
Ryan has been playing a game called AI.
AI?
AI, the Somnium Files, I think is the full name. Again, for some reason it has a colon in the middle of the name. So, it's actually a really interesting game, but it's a visual novel / murder mystery.
Interesting.
So think point-and-click adventure, but heavily story-based and, like I said, a visual novel. So basically a lot of going through text scenes where people are talking to each other. So if that's not like your style of game, it's not the type of game that a lot of people would go into. But I've played several games by the same director, and I like all his stories. They are wonderful and overly convoluted.
So a lot of extra data that you don't need?
More along the lines of all of his games have peeled off of, they either take some sort of sci-fi twist or some sort of fantasy twist that add various layers to things. The problem is I can't talk too much about it without giving out all of the spoilers to this game. Yeah, so game update for Ryan for this past week has been AI, the Somnium Files, and I would say fun game. If you like visual novel games, I would highly recommend it. But keeping in mind, there is a few instances of violence and gore. That's pretty much the main things that are the issues in that game. Because, murder mystery tends to have that.
The murder part.
The murder part tends to have, blood. There's some other smaller things that some parents might not like their kid to play, but it is rated M for a reason.
We don't really have a good health check-in. We haven't been competing recently.
No, we have not been competing. I have also been a bit slacky on the going to the gym.
And I've been doing good because I've been having very active days.
Yeah, well, my days have been very active. There was this weird thing that happened on Tuesday that made me run all over the school building. Yeah, that server. But you know what? The server's running again. That's all that matters.
Yeah.
We've now got it so that the SQL is running independently. We can do the same with Apache and just say goodbye, MAMP, but...
Yeah. Well, especially when we switch over to Linode, we're going to have to do that. So
yeah.
I think maybe we do it a little bit sooner.
This podcast totally not brought to you by Linode, but we'd be willing to accept money from them.
Yes, wouldn't mind a Linode sponsor. Really, the reason I know about Linode is all the sponsors and all the other ones.
Mm-hmm. That's the thing is, it's right up there with ExpressVPN.
My Synology, actually. How I learned about Synology was because they sponsored ATP back in the day. I mean, they don't anymore, but I mean, this was like 5 years ago.
But yeah, that's what it comes down to. We just want to say to all these sponsors out there that the sponsorship of you giving some love to some of those podcasts got us as customers.
Eero. Wouldn't mind an Eero.
Would not mind one of those, but then again, I also don't really have
multiple rooms.
Too much space in my house. I mean, I could set one up so that you can get the internet in my storage room. That's pretty much the only place that is not getting good signal because it is the furthest spot in my apartment from my...
Yeah, it's your front room, right?
Exactly. It's the front room that does not have an air conditioner in it, so in the winter it's really cold, and the summer it's really hot, so it is definitely where I just store all of my DVDs after I've moved them to my Synology and various things of that nature.
All right, well, let's jump into Parsley games.
All right. So one of those things that we wanted to talk about, our media that we're going to mention, is what is called Parsley games. We are going to be very vague here because these games are very fun and they are great to discover and they are great to discover for yourself. But we do not want to give out spoilers for these games because then it ruins the experience that you can have playing this game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you don't have to go and buy this and do this before you listen to the podcast. Experience it in a party sometime.
Yeah, this is our high recommendation for you to go and play this. This is a series of games from a developer, and you can reach all of his stuff on, I believe it's mementomori.com.
Yep, memento-mori.com.
Which, you gotta love that as the name.
Okay, can you explain it then? Because I don't think I understand all of it.
Oh, okay. Memento mori is actually a phrase that people used to use that means basically remember mortality or remember death.
Oh, okay.
So some people use it as a remember that you are mortal. Ancient, medieval church monks and priests used to use it to basically say, remember that you are mortal and that eventually that you're going to have to face up to what you're doing. And some people used it as a remember you are mortal as a carpe diem sort of idea. But it's an interesting idea, but behind it all is the phrase, basically, it is remember death or remember mortality. So it's a very interesting thing. You'll see a lot of people use it in art a lot recently that I've seen where they will use that phrase, that Latin phrase. It is more morbid in some places where they'll actually have pictures of skulls and things like that. But it comes down from that idea of remember that you are mortal, and that can be taken in a whole lot of different ways. That was a complete side note. Sorry about that.
That's okay. A parsley game is a text adventure. It's a text adventure being mimicking what you would have played on your Apple IIe, basically, right?
Yeah.
Where you would get a string of text and then you type something in like go north, pick up Brock. You type that in and hit return, and then it would spit back more text to you. So as in a game with basically no graphics, just going back and forth with text.
Your traditional games on your computer, things like Zork, even back to your original King's Quest type games, your text-based adventures.
Mm-hmm.
They set a scene for you, and you say a command. You type in a command, and the computer would parse that command and decide what happens based on what you tell it to do.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, there are many text-based adventures out there that did this. Zork is pretty much your traditional go-to for this example. You know, you are in danger of being eaten by a grue sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so the Parsley games are a mimicking of that style of game done in front of people. So it almost feels to me like a melding of the Zork type games and almost a Dungeons and Dragons type thing.
Mm-hmm.
Except, you know, you're not creating a character, so.
I was first introduced to this from the Incomparable podcast.
From the Incomparable Game Show?
I think they might have played one. Did they only play it on the game show, or did they play one on the main Incomparable feed?
I think they might have played one on the main Incomparable, and then they went to the game show.
Okay. But I think that's where I was first introduced. But my question is, in Incomparable, they have a parser, which we'll get into later, and then a set of people entering commands in a row.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the primary way the game should be played? You can't play it alone. You have to play it.
Yeah.
I mean, the parser has to be separate from the player. But is it meant to be played with a group in a line?
Basically, it is actually supposed to be played that way. Each player is supposed to take a turn to give a command, usually a one-word, two-word format sort of idea, like open door, take key, save game.
Which is followed by a song, always.
Always followed by a song, because we were introduced to this through the Incomparable, and there's always a save song.
Right, because that's what the disk drives used to make those sounds. Mm-hmm. Which, yeah, they're just mimicking the disk drives.
Mm-hmm. There are many versions of these games. So he has created a lot of these different versions where it's like there's Action Castle 2, Action Castle 3, there's Jungle Adventure, Six Gun Showdown, Space Station, Spooky Manor, Z-Ward, that's all about zombies. So there's all these different types of games to give you these different settings. But to give you an idea of what we're talking about for this sort of thing, Action Castle 1 begins with saying, "Welcome to Action Castle. You are standing in a small cottage. There's a fishing pole here, a door leads outside." And then it is up to the players to decide what to do. They can say, "I want to check out that fishing pole," or "I want to go outside," or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And it is an adventure that you play with your friends to discover more about yourself.
Or at least about your friends.
And how much you disagree with all of how their logic works.
Mm-hmm.
Because technically how this game is supposed to work is you're not supposed to really discuss your plans on what you want to do with each other. Because that makes it more fun in my mind, at least.
I think so too. Mm-hmm. You have to be on the same page as everybody else without telling everybody else what page you're on. To me, that's one of the best parts of this game, is that when someone isn't on the right page,
Mm-hmm.
you know, in your head you're thinking, okay, we're going to go over to that room and pick up that thing, right? So you start moving the character that direction, and then you get somebody in the line who is just not getting it and moves you back out of that room. And then you're like, no, go north again. Yeah, to me, that's the best. I mean, it just makes it more fun because it's kind of frustrating in some ways, but that's when the hilarity ensues.
Mm-hmm. I am in charge of a board game club at the school that we work at, and I have played a couple of these games with our students, and getting the students to follow that rule is hard, But I think some of the best things that have happened in these games have happened when they have actually followed that rule. They walk into a room and one person is thinking, oh, we need to do this, and the other person does the opposite of that, and there were repercussions.
The next best thing, I think, to me about Parsley games is when you're at the end of the rope and you don't know what to do, and you just start saying silly things to see what the computer will do, or the parser. Hilarious. So yes, when you're at the end of the rope and you're saying things like present plunger, that's the best stuff.
I will say the game goes even better if you have a clever parser who can roll with some of the stupid.
All right, so what is the parser?
Oh, the parser is basically, they take the role of the computer. They are to accept the commands like a computer would.
Yep, and then they read through the script that's in the PDF.
So if it's not something that fits into what's in the PDF, many times they, honestly, in my opinion, they probably should come up with something to say, whether it's, I'm sorry, you cannot use the axe on your princess.
Your sister doesn't want a plunger.
Or your sister doesn't want a plunger.
That's one of my favorite things. Because you say something ridiculous to the parser should say something ridiculous back.
Honestly, that's why I related this earlier to Dungeons and Dragons. Because if your parser has ever been in or been a player in or even a dungeon master in, probably better to be a dungeon master in a Dungeons and Dragons campaign, that's probably the best kind of quick-wittedness that you will need. That sort of style. I'm not saying that that's a requirement.
No. And I'm not the best parser because I don't always come up with something quick. But it is fun to be the parser sometimes too.
Oh, being the parser I find very fun, mostly because it gives me an excuse to be overly sarcastic with everyone.
Well, because a computer would be.
Yes. I'm sorry. I don't know what you mean by play violin for zombie. These are not expensive games.
I think they only sell them in the pack now. But still, it's only $20 for the PDF.
He sells a interactive PDF for $20 for 12 games, I think. And a hardcover copy of that same book for $30.
If you buy the hardcover, you get the PDF as well.
Oh, do you? Oh, I did not know that.
But he only ships the hardcover to America.
Oh, that was why. That was why I didn't do that. He used to sell these in single game shots that for like $1 or $2.
Yeah. But you want all of them. You do.
Honestly, if you're going to play these, if you live in the States, the hardcover is beautiful and the interactive PDF is fantastic because if you are the parser, you just click on the text and it just takes you to where they need to go after that.
When they were sold individually, I already bought 3. And I wish I had more already, so.
I think I bought 2 when they were sold individually, and then I went and bought the interactive PDF when it became available, the instant it became available. Simply because it also, on the top of everything else, had redesigned art, and it was beautifully drawn. And I am a sucker for an art book. I have bought far too many video game special editions simply because they say, and if you get the special edition, it comes with a free art book. It's not free. The special edition cost a lot more money.
You're paying for that.
Oh, I'm paying for that.
I mean, one of the nice things about the interactive PDF too is that it guides you through the process as well, right? You click the PDF to get to what the parser has to say next. As opposed to, I mean, the PDFs before were nice. They were still very followable as they were because the colors and stuff that they had used made it very easy to read. But they were basically large pieces of paper that you had to scroll around.
And most of them were basically 2 pages.
Yeah.
At that time.
But the PDF makes it quite easy to jump to the right spot without having to search for it.
And I will also say it's larger text, so it's easier to read.
That's true, yeah. The only thing it doesn't have is an inventory catalog for you, right?
Oh, no, it has that.
Oh, it does? Okay, I didn't know that.
But it's on the final page of each of them, and you can, if you click on basically it's a checkbox.
You can check them on and off?
You can tick them on and off.
Does it have 3 steps for save states?
It does not. So if you want to listen to one of these games being played before you go out and buy one of these things yourself, the Incomparables have a podcast on their Incomparable Game Show. I would say, just because of how much it made me laugh, Z-Ward.
Z-Ward. Mm-hmm.
I thought that one was an excellent one. I found that one hilarious. I would highly recommend listening to it.
Game show number 82. It'll be in the show notes. Please do listen to it.
If you have listened to some of their other stuff, they have also played Adventure Castle 1, 2, and 3. They've played Jungle Adventure, I think.
Yeah, they've done Jungle Adventure.
They did Space Station.
And they just did the Spooky Manor, too.
Oh, yes, they just did Spooky Manor.
They haven't ever done the Six Gun Showdown. I think that was on Relay FM. That was in the Relay FM member special.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, the Relay FM, they just did Danger Town Beatdown.
That's actually one I have not played.
So, yep, quite fun. These games are quite fun. You should try them out.
Like we said, if you want to listen first, you can go ahead and listen to one of the Incomparable Game Show play an actual version of this. But still, this is a whole lot of fun. I highly recommend getting a chance and playing this.
Mm-hmm.
And, support the artist who made it, because there's lots of money in the independent RPG making scene through distributed online. So, highly suggest support the work.
We have a second media today.
Yes. We chose to do two medias today because both of the media that we picked today are short. And the other one that we wanted to talk about today was recommended by Nate, called Jungle Jam and Friends.
I think it's Jungle Jam and Friends. I don't see that anywhere in the artwork anymore, but I'm pretty sure that that's what the tape box that we bought when I was little said. Yeah, so basically this is, I think it was a radio show that played over the radio. I'm not even sure what stations it played on because my parents were controlling the dial for us back then because I didn't know how to control the dial back then. I'm pretty sure, though, we bought it when it was released on audio tape. So I'm wondering if we must have picked it up at like our local Christian bookstore or something. That's my guess.
While we're here, why don't you explain for our audience, what is Jungle Jam and Friends?
Jungle Jam and Friends is a Christian audio show that explains values to kids. And they have a bunch of voices that are animals trying to get along in the jungle together. They do have a secondary storyline of Marvy Snuffleson learning how to be a little boy. We're not going to do that storyline today. We're going to stick with the animals, but maybe we'll do Marvy Snuffleson another time. We're doing the animals in the forest, and we're covering two of my favorites today. There are many other good ones, but we're doing Golden Rocks and the Tree Pears and Treasure of the Sierra Marbles. And there'll be links to those in the show notes if you want them. They are $4 each, and you get 2 shows. I mean, each of those Treasure, Sierra Marbles, and Golden Rocks and Tree Pears, they're about 10-minute episodes if you're just doing the talking part. I think what they did was they released 2 10-minute episodes with songs and some talking in between. That ends up being about a half an hour show. So if you spend $4, you'll get the show we're talking about, plus another show and some songs for $4. So if you spend $8, you get both shows. Probably when I was in high school, I recorded the tapes onto my computer, and I've been listening to those ever since. So yeah, I listened to my old recordings. But yeah, please do, again, support this company. I assume they probably don't get many sales anymore because this is really old stuff. But, 80s. We're probably talking 1980s stuff. But it's great.
I will be honest, I could tell it was 1980s.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so one of the questions I definitely have is, are they great because I grew up with them and I have the nostalgia for them? Or are they great on their own? That's one of the big questions I have for Ryan today.
Okay. So this is the first time I've ever heard of Jungle Jam.
Mm-hmm.
I would say, for me, it sounded like an audio show that was somewhere between The Muppet Show and VeggieTales.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
That is the best way I can describe what I heard today.
Yeah, basically audio puppets, right?
Yeah. It sounded like that. So the reason I say that I could definitely tell it was 80s was some of the jokes that they made, unless you know 80s style lingo, you would not understand some of these jokes.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Losing my marbles and every joke that goes along with that.
Yeah. So please do listen to these first.
Yes, the two that we're talking about today were the Golden Rocks and the Tree Pears, and the High Sierra.
Treasure of the Sierra Marbles.
Treasure of the Sierra Marbles. That's right. Both of these are basically your Christian allegory stories that are trying to teach some sort of moral.
Mm-hmm.
In the case of the Tree Pears, the moral is to trust in God to take care of things. Basically, just not worry about so much.
Yeah, don't worry about what you can't control.
Yeah.
Actually, Nozzle sums it up at one point. He says, what is it? Trust in God in all you do, and he will see you through.
Yeah, it's basically don't worry about the things that you can't control.
Mm-hmm.
And the marble one, the Treasure of the Sierra Marbles, was all about basically not being greedy.
Yeah, how greed can ruin your thinking, how greed can poison your mind.
I will say that while the jokes were definitely from the 80s, I laughed.
Oh, yeah.
Because I get that humor. I don't know how well it would age if I had kids who didn't know that language or didn't know that style of humor. It was very Muppet Show style in its humor.
But I think it goes over their heads.
Yeah.
I think they see the situation as funny, but they're not getting everything. Like when he says, oh, you didn't ground your marbles into dust. Where were you when I needed you?
Yeah.
Right? Like they're not getting that part. But
Or, oh no, what'll we do? The tree's bark is falling off. Start a bonfire?
burn it. Let's burn it now.
Let's burn it now.
Okay, you know what? That was one of the sayings that went around my family for quite a while. Burn it. Let's burn it now.
Let's burn it now. Why wait? Let's burn it now. So that is actually one of the lines that came up that I could not stop laughing at when they were like, oh yes, this terrible thing is happening. What should we do? Why wait? Burn it down. Burn it now.
Good. So I'm glad I can make these jokes with you now.
Yes, you now have the ability to make jokes about burning things down.
Oh yeah, I love it. I mean, even like I got a whole bunch of lines here, but yeah. Except that time in the Bermuda Triangle, but let's not talk about that.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So they have a lot of really quick one-liners that are just nice and quippy.
Mm-hmm.
The way I feel about the style of humor is it feels very Muppet Show. Almost Statler and Waldorf style. It's a wonderful setup, and then they just knock it out of the park with their punchline.
Oh yeah, I think that's exactly right. It's a wonderful setup, and they knock it out, and they come back to it at just the right time, with just the right length. Even that whole burn it thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the last line in the show.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, they set it up at the beginning. They talked about it like, okay, we're not going to burn it. We're moving on. And then the very last line, because they find another tree, what are we going to do? Burn it. The show ends, right? It's perfect.
Yeah.
They don't hang on it any more than they need to. You know, just, wonderful.
You definitely need a certain type of humor to understand and get this type of humor.
Mm-hmm.
It was great, and I laughed. But I don't know how many people outside of a particular set of personalities would join in on that.
It's probably right for a specific set of personalities. I think one of the interesting things to me is how well the characters actually work together. I'm sorry, not together on the show, because, interestingly, they don't always work together well on the show, but how they
play off of each other?
How they play off each other and how strongly they're built.
Mm.
And it's tough in these two episodes to see all of it. I've listened to many of them. I'm not even sure I've listened to all of them, but I've listened to many of them. So I like Nozzles a lot. Nozzles is one of my favorite characters. He's the one that's saying burn it now. Probably that's part of the reason. But he does act as the wise person above the rest of the animals most of the time, and is often teaching the lesson to the rest of them.
Mm.
I do like that about him, but he's also got great ones. Like one time in one of the shows, we learn that his job in the jungle is to get water for everyone. Then the narrator lets it slip that he's getting the water from the stream. And he's like, what? there's a stream in the jungle. I've been getting water from the ocean. Like, every once in a while, it's pretty funny. And they do play off the fact that he's an elephant and remembers everything. Sully is another of my favorite characters. He does star in a few of them. This is one of the big ones, Treasure of the Sierra Marbles, but he does have a few other episodes where he's the star. And he's definitely one of the elementary age characters that is learning, the character that the kids are identifying with. This character's learning and I'm identifying with them as they're learning, right? Do you call that an expository character? Somebody who's getting all the exposition or giving all the exposition?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's got those great lines, here comes the choo-choo train.
Yeah.
And I love the line, I'm awestruck by its grandeur, right? That line's kind of funny because I'm not sure he would really come up with that line.
Yeah, there were a few times where I was like, I feel like some of these jokes would land better if I actually knew these characters a bit more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there is an intro episode too.
Mm.
I mean, these ones are the more funny ones, I think, so I kind of started with these. I can recognize all the voices and I pick them all out. And they don't really introduce, like I was noticing, they don't introduce Millard in the Golden Rocks and the Tree Bears. They don't ever call him by name, but you can hear him in there. He's the one that's saying, "It's beautiful."
Oh, yeah.
Which I do wonder if they actually used the same "It's beautiful" clip for the Treasure of the Sierra Marbles.
It sounded very similar. In listening to Millard's voice was very hard for me to understand what he was saying a couple of times.
Yeah, Millard is a little bit hard to understand, but he does have a few other episodes where he's great. But he is yet again a character that needs the lessons hammered home to him every time, right?
Mm.
Which is, again, evident in this one because he still doesn't learn at the end of the episode.
Well, they did learn that it was the hardest ground they ever sat on.
Exactly. My own eyes, these two right here. I love it. It goes, "Legend?" And then you hear two crickets chirp. What's a legend? I love it. Yeah. Gruffy Bear is also a great character. He's the one coming up with all the construction plans.
Oh, yes. Where he's just like, oh, and I have this other plan.
I mean, he's like the Tim the Toolman Taylor kind of thing, right?
A very simple plan of a 45-mile-long aqueduct.
Well, that one actually came from Nozzles. He's the one building the giant shade device.
Oh, yeah.
So, the big ones. He had the big plans.
Oh, yes, the big plans.
And then took a cat nap under the drafting table. Cheetah Anita, who is the one that starts the episode.
Yeah.
She is not a major character at all, really. I think they just needed another character, so they stuck her in this one. Because they don't really have another good character for that. I think the production is great, too. Because I look at, now that I've been editing audio, the amount of work they put in is unbelievable into these. Like the organ playing when they see the high Sierras, the Sierras, that their whole thing rhymes when they're talking. There's always background sounds going on when they're in the jungle. And there's sound effects playing at the right time, like flying off, the running, the crunching leaf sounds, the construction sounds when they're building things. There's always tons of stuff playing.
Yeah.
The marbles being lost down the waterfall.
Mm.
Yeah, so lots of good stuff.
All right, add the dirt.
Beep, beep, beep. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's good stuff. So one of the things I did find out, High and Lewis Sierra, speaking of great one-liners, the sodium and the pronouns.
Can you tell me the atomic symbol for sodium?
Nah.
You pass.
Strunken White. I think my parents told me this, but I looked it up again today. White is the same White as E.B. White. So it's the guy who wrote Trumpet of the Swan and Stuart Little and Charlotte's Web. So he wrote a book on proper English style. So they're referring to that book. And they said, yeah, name a sentence that contains two pronouns, right? Who, me? So yeah, same White that is E.B. White.
I did not know that.
I looked it up again today, and it's definitely him. Yeah, The Ground is Hard is one of those jokes that they bring it back at the right time, right?
Yeah. He follows the rule of 3. That's it. Mm-hmm. He does it once, and you're like, oh, that's kind of silly. He does it a second time, and you chuckle because he's still on the same thing, and then they move on. And then a little bit later...
At the very end, yeah.
At the very end of that whole little scene, they say it together.
Yeah, they pull it out of nowhere again, right? Like,
this ground is really hard.
Because you're expecting them to say, oh, I'm walking away with the marbles, right? Yeah. But no, they come up with, no, it's the hardest ground I've ever slept on.
Yeah. And honestly, that comes down to they follow the comedic rule of 3, but they also circumvent your expectations.
I think the humor is right up my alley.
Yeah. And I enjoyed the humor.
I figured you'd kind of like them.
Oh, yeah, I did. I thought the humor was excellent. I thought it was well timed. There were a couple of times where I just could not stop smiling and laughing. A lot of it centered around like making plans and burning things down, but
We tried some of Gruffy's ideas 3 or 4 times.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad my kids like them.
Yeah.
I think you are right. I think it is aging a little bit. In one of the episodes, they talk about a guy having to wire the telephone in,
Yeah.
which is definitely already aging.
What? No, telephones are what sit in your pocket.
Right. Telephones are the things you have games on. What are you talking about?
There are several jokes in there that I can feel their age.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's just the way with humor in general. No matter what comedy show I watch now, if it is comedy, it dates itself very easily. It's hard to find comedy that is ageless outside of Monty Python, because you know Monty Python.
No, I think that ages too.
What?
I'm sorry. It is still funny, but I think it ages.
I was raised on a variety of comedy, all of which might have been dated when I started watching them, but I loved it.
Yeah, but I think one of the nice things about these kinds of things like Jungle Jam and these old stuff is that I think they really still hold value. I heard recently that the purchase of old music had surpassed the purchase of recently released music. You know, the purchase of music older than a year had surpassed the purchase of music that has been released within the year back in a few years ago. And now people purchase more older music. But the catalog of older music is just getting bigger and bigger. Most of it, anyway, is probably not getting bad quickly. Some of it definitely is.
Oh, yeah.
The stuff that's good is just collecting.
I think that's the thing is we talk about these things as like they're dating themselves and things like that. But the things that are truly classics, the things that last, the things that have lasting value, they make it through that time where you're like, oh, can they keep going? Is this worth keeping around because it is showing its age? And then they get to the other side where you just go, yeah, this is a classic. And I think that's the thing is it is time and it is age that separates those that are a flash in the pan from the classics that we always go back to. And I think it's the same way with books.
And it might need some explanation. Like, I mean, to me, I was showing the original Mission Impossible to my oldest daughter. And what was hilarious to me was we didn't finish the episode. It was a 2-parter, so it was an hour and a half episode. But she didn't want to finish it because she was getting stressed watching it, which I found hilarious because it's not fast, right? Like, this is 1960s television. It's slow. You know, it moves very slowly compared to what she watches now. But she was getting too stressed, so she didn't want to finish it.
Well, I mean, keep in mind, I know you've probably seen a lot more recent shows than I have, but it feels to me like a lot of the more recent shows are just a barrage on your senses. They don't take things slow at all. It's just everything's go, 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 go.
No, I agree.
So I think when you talk about, oh yeah, the original Mission Impossible, anything's going to seem slow. When that barrage is what you're used to.
But even with the slowness, she was still kind of stressed, which was kind of interesting to me. But the other thing I was going to say is Mission Impossible, I still had to do a lot of explaining about, why are they going to another country to get the nuclear missiles, right? Okay, so we had to talk about that. Yeah, we had to discuss Cold War a little bit, and why are they here? And, what is he playing that recording on? Oh, that's a record player. And he had to put the needle in the right spot to get the right... It's like, okay, we had to explain that a little bit. So there was a few things in there that I had to explain what's going on. Why is there a hotel safe? Because they don't have safes in each room. And he had valuable equipment. And, so, yeah. Anyway, it was a bit interesting.
I guess there is a lot more than I think of that it needs a lot of explanation at this point.
Right, like they were able to make fake ID cards right on the spot, right? You can't do that anymore. And things are much more biometrically protected.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, when your phone knows your face.
Yeah, back then you could get Cinnamon to get you anything, and boom, you're good to go. And Martin Landau to fake any face you wanted. So,
That's all you need.
especially when Martin Landau's character got replaced with Spock, that was great stuff. Anyway, sorry. He was Leonard Nimoy. Sorry.
We all know who you're talking about. And by we, I mean...
The 5 people who know Mission Impossible. Still. The Mission Impossible that didn't have Tom Cruise.